spouse is characteristic of reactive violence?
If you are running away from your spouse who is trying to hurt you, yes.
All right, so you can throw a can of mineral spirits. What about if you throw a can of Red Bull?
Again, it depends on like the incident I think that you're referring to. That was not necessarily reactive violence. That was in a state of frustration or anger.
All right, so when you throw a can of Red Bull in a state of frustration or anger, that's not reactive violence.
No.
Right. What about if you throw a bottle of vodka because your husband fell off the wagon? Is that reactive violence?
Are you asking me hypothetically?
I'm asking you, would that be a characteristic of reactive violence? Throw a bottle of vodka because your husband fell off the wagon.
If it's in the middle of an assault, perhaps. If it's independent of that, no.
Right. So, for instance, if your husband was just having a couple of shots at the bar.
Again, you would need more information and context to make that determination.
All right. You don't think that's a reflection of reactive violence? And you'll agree with me that when you throw the second bottle, that's not reactive violence.
If somebody's throwing multiple bottles, psychological violence and abuse is psychologically destabilizing, which destabilizes individuals' coping strategies. That is absolutely true.
Lost what's true. Is it your testimony that once you've thrown one bottle and missed, when you throw the second one, now it's reactive violence?
That's not what I'm saying. I don't think throwing bottles is acceptable in any context.
All right. All right. I'm going to ask you about some of the testing that you did. One of the things that you did was a form called a CTS2 relationship behaviors form.
The conflict tactics scale, correct.
So CTS2 stands for conflict tactics scale.
That's correct.
And this is one of the documents that you had with you on the stand yesterday.
I had all my testing with me and all my clinical notes from my evaluation with Ms. Hurd.
And you gave me a copy of it because you looked at it during your testimony.
Because you asked me, so I gave it to you, yes.
Right. All right. But you have a good recollection of what that test is about, the CTS2 test.
I have a very good memory and a very good recollection. I want to give the jury the most accurate and thorough information. After having done 12 tests with so many questions, I wanted to just be as accurate as possible. I'm sure my memory would miss some things that might be relevant.
All right, so let's talk about the CTS2. It's dated 9/26/2019.
Correct.
All right, 9/26/2019. And it goes through and it asks a whole series of questions about what you've done and what your partner has done.
That's correct.
There's tons of these questions.
Correct.
And every single one of those questions is preceded by the same question, right? How often did this happen in the past year?
Correct.
You knew that as of 9/26/2019, not a single one of the things that Ms. Hurd identified happened to her in the last year.
Correct.
Right.
She was oriented to a different time frame to get a checklist of those behaviors.
Right. And one of the although it says, please, how often did this happen in the past year? One of the questions is, my partner used force to make me have oral or anal sex.
Correct.
Do you have any recollection that she didn't go with zero on that?
I have a recollection at that point in time, she was framing those type of acts as angry sex.
Oh, 400.
She
And you
wasn't
helped
framing them as physical force, as most women don't on these measures.
And you helped her to reframe it as something other than angry sex, didn't you, Doctor?
My job was not to do treatment, my job was to do an evaluation, and that's what I did.
All right. So you did an evaluation, and one of the evaluations you did, and one of the diagnoses that you ultimately made relates to PTSD.
That is correct.
All right. And you diagnosed Amber Heard with PTSD long before you made use of the gold standard test for PTSD.
That is correct.
All right.
And I make the diagnosis of PTSD in my clinical practice without using the CAPS all the time.
All right. So just so that you and I are on the same page, and I think we are, this gold standard test that I'm referring to is the CAPS-5.
That is correct.
That's the one that Dr. Curry administered, correct?
Correct.
All right. You didn't administer the CAP-5 until after you'd already diagnosed Amber Heard with PTSD, right?
She had PTSD in 2019. She had PTSD in the beginning of 2021 when I evaluated her. And then she had PTSD in December 27, 2021 when I administered the CAPS. That's correct.
All right. I think I asked a much more narrow question than that. You didn't diagnose, you didn't give the CAPS-5. Oh, no, I'm going to strike that question altogether and start it again. You had already diagnosed her with PTSD before you did the gold standard, correct?
Before I administered the CAPS-5, there was enough data in the psychological testing and my clinical evaluation to establish that she met criteria for PTSD. That is correct.
You submitted an expert disclosure in this case on January 11th, 2022.
I believe the attorney submitted that disclosure, yes.
You participated in that?
In the January 11th, it was the same disclosure that went before. There were no changes on that.
Did you reference the CAPS-5 in that at all?
I don't believe I gave the results of the CAPS-5 to the attorneys at that point.
All right. You met with, I got dates here. This time I'm using the cheat sheet. All right. You met with Amber Heard on September 26, 2019.
I would love to have my cheat sheet, but I'll take your word for it.
I'll share.
Thank you.
October 11th, 2019. When did you give the CAPS-5?
The CAPS-5 was administered the last time that I saw Ms. Heard. I saw her over, as is stated multiple times, over the past 2.5 years, and having not seen her in about a year to get an accurate assessment of her current symptoms, having had all the background information, the CAPS-5 is a great structured clinical interview to do that.
All right. So you hadn't seen her for about a year before you gave her that test.
That is correct.
And you did it over Zoom.
That is correct.
All right. Why don't we pull up PX 1247? This may. I'll get you.
Sure. It's just to the witness right now, so, okay. Okay.
Sure. You can, Dr. Hughes, you can actually help with that question. This is like more than 20 pages long.
It's about 20 pages.
Right. All right. Let's get a copy of it. This is a series of questions that you use to test for PTSD.
Correct.
And you recognize the first page. This is the first page that you filled out. That's your handwriting.
That's correct.
I'd like to publish the first page to the jury.
Do you wish to have it in evidence? Are you moving it into evidence?
Yes, I am.
He's just publishing the first page. Any objection to the first? Okay, first page in evidence? Could you put your microphone on? I'm just having...
I don't have the ability to scroll down, so I can't see the rest of this.
All right.
It's a brand new
I'm sure they'll
exhibit.
get you a copy of it.
Thank you.
That's right.
I'd like to go to the second page. Can we put up the second page?
Are you putting a second page into evidence?
Not yet.
Then I can't put it up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'd like the witness to see the second.
The witness can see the second page.
Thank you. This is the second page. This is instructions on how you do it.
Correct.
All right. And then we'll go to the third page. Let's let the witness see the third page. Now, this is entitled scoring.
Correct.
So when you score, you look at two things, right? You look at frequency and intensity.
Correct.
All right. Those are the two factors you use to score.
Correct.
All right. Can we go to the fourth page of this document and just show it to the witness? All right. So, Dr. Hughes, this is the first page of the CAPS B where, other than the identifying information, where there's any input into the document, correct?
The CAPS 5, you said the CAPS B?
Yeah, I misspoke.
Okay, yes. This is the criterion A, which means that in order to, as I said yesterday, to obtain a diagnosis of PTSD, you have to have sustained a very specific traumatic event. That's the first B to get through the door.
All right. So, Your Honor, I'm gonna, I'd like to be able to get them a copy of this. Is it too early to take the break or?
A little bit if you
All right,
can.
I can do something.
Okay.
All right. All right, so do you recognize the first page, or the fourth page of this document?
Yes, I do.
And the handwriting on the fourth page is yours?
It's all my handwriting.
All right, the entirety of it is yours. I'm going to move this document into evidence along with the first page. And that one is, what number? I think it is
You're still on 1247.
1247.
Okay, so you want to move the entirety of 1247 in.
Yes.
Do you have a copy of 1247? It's Exhibit 1247?
I don't have the whole page in front of me.
Well, I mean, do you have plaintiff's exhibits 1247? Plaintiff's 1247. No, I don't have it either.
Oh, it's defendants 1435.
1435. Defendants 1435.
Take your time.
It
Did you want to take a look at the court's copy? Would that be easier for you?
says, it's 59 pages. What is he moving in? I mean, I don't think.
I
we
think
can
he's
do a
moving the,
partial.
are you moving the entire document in?
Yeah, I'm going to move the entire document in evidence.
I don't think I have an objection to that.
No objection?
No
Did you want to
objection.
take a look at the court's copy, or you're good?
Yeah, I would, thank you. My apologies.
That's fine. Thank you, Jamie.
It's going to show the evaluation too, right? No objection. objection on
All right, so even though I pulled it from defendants 1435, we want to make this 1247 plaintiffs, correct?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay.
it. Does your honor want to back?
I kind of need it. Thank you. We'll just change the number on it. All right.
All right.
So it's 1247. I say, okay, 1247 in evidence. Plaintiff's 1247 in evidence, and now it can be published to the jury.
Thank you. Why don't we publish the fourth page where we're talking about? All right. So what this references is the event you said was the worst, and what you have filled in here is 3 words. IPV by John, right?
Correct.
All right. And then what happened is the next box, and you've not written a single thing in the box, right?
Because I've already spent 20 some odd hours with Ms. Hurd, I know what goes in that box. If you look at the top, it says administer the life-check checklist or an other structured trauma screen. That screen had already been conducted.
Right, but there's a box on the gold standard test that asks what happened, and it says, how old were you? How were you involved? Who else was involved? Was anyone seriously injured or killed? Was anyone in life danger? And none of that information you provide in your analysis on the CAPS file.
Your honor, I hesitate to object, but that's very compound.
It is.
Okay. I'll sustain the objection if you want to rephrase.
We can do it
Okay.
the slow way. The first question is, how old were you?
All of the information that would go in that box is contained in my 80-plus clinical notes of my evaluation of Ms. Hurd up until this point. It would have been incredibly redundant to do that again here.
But you knew other people would review this, didn't you?
And I knew that they would have my clinical notes as well.
Oh, so they're supposed to parse through your clinical notes so that they can figure out what you chose to be the anchoring event.
I didn't choose to be the anchor. The client chooses to the anchor to identify what the worst event is for them.
You wrote IPV by Johnny. That's what you determined to be the anchoring event.
When I asked Ms. Hurd, once again, of the traumatic events that she experienced in her life, which one is the worst, this is what she indicated.
Okay. But you provided no details with respect to it.
There are plethora of details in my 80-page is a handwritten, single-spaced clinical notes.
Correct. All right. Let's go to the next page. All right. You felt it appropriate to fill this page out, didn't you, Doctor?
Well, these are the questions about the symptoms, so I'm asking specific questions and getting her responses.
Didn't you know this already?
I was making sure at this point, having not seen her for a year, what is the trauma expression at this time? It can change over time. It could go away. It can get better. It can get worse.
All right. Why don't we go a couple more pages in? Let's go into page 7 of 20. Now, there are a couple of boxes that you filled in on this. Let's look at item 5, B5. You don't provide any indication of what kind of triggers, what kind of reminders trigger these reactions.
She answered that on the previous questions.
All right. And you didn't provide any answer as to how long does it take to recover.
She has some difficulty recovering.
Okay. And then there's this question that says, how often has this happened in the past month? Number of times.
Correct.
And we talked about how these things are scored, and we looked at, you got to look at frequency and intensity, right?
Correct.
And you left the frequency box blank.
Well, no, if she said several times a month, then that's what the frequency is.
And you didn't fill that frequency box in at all.
Because she told me it was frequently several times a month, which is one of the anchors in coding the CAPS.
All right, let's look at the next one. The very next box. Again, this is scored by frequency and intensity. How often in the past month?
Correct.
Blank.
Pardon?
How often in the past month? You left that one blank again, right?
She tells me it happens at least twice a week, so certainly I could multiply 2 times 4 and put in 8.
And you certainly could have written the number 2.
But it wasn't 2, if it's
Oh.
happening 2 times a week.
All right, so 2 times a week times the number of months. Now you got 2 digits instead of 1, right? That's all it took to write that down.
This is in a 1-month period, so it would have been a 4-week period.
How often in the past month? That's what it says.
Correct. You said
chose
months.
not to answer that question. Let's look at the next page. Again, scoring is frequency and intensity. How often in the past month? Again, you left it blank.
If you look on the right-hand box, that is where we are indicating the frequency and the severity. If you can see where I circled moderates happening more than twice a month, that's where I am indicating the frequency of the symptom expression.
Okay. But aren't you skipping a step? You're supposed to do intensity and frequency.
And when
You're-
somebody says it's happening more than twice a month, that is a frequency indicator.
All right. Let's go to the next box. Again, we have, in the past month, how many of the important parts of event have you difficulty remembering? Number of important aspects. Didn't fill it up.
Well, I listed 2 specific incidents of where she indicates she has important aspects that are missing.
But all you had to do is put a number in here. You knew how to score this thing.
Well, this measure actually doesn't get scored by the frequency.
All right, you know something, you're right. Let's look at the next one.
I know.
The next one gets scored by the frequency. That's blank, right?
Well, I did not code it as a PTSD symptom.
Okay, let's go to the next one. How much of the time in the past month have you felt that way as a percentage?
Right? So as you can see, I circled 20 to 30% of the time.
Right.
It's just as I'm putting it on the right side in the box where I'm coding the instrument.
We're going to talk about the right side in a minute. You took issue with the way that Dr. Curry did this testing.
Correct.
Right. But your test, in every instance where you're asked the number of times and to fill in the blank, you leave it blank.
They're on the right side of the document.
All right. You want to talk about the right side of the document? Let's do that. After you did the CAPS 5 for the anchoring, the 3-word anchoring event, IPV by Johnny, you went back through again and said, maybe I should consider childhood trauma as well, right?
I wanted to test for the limits and see at this point in time, Ms. Hurd had a child, and sometimes when people have children, their trauma gets evoked. Is she having those symptoms as well? She already had, based on this instrument, the PTSD from the interpersonal violence. I wanted to see if there were any additional symptoms.
All right. And you knew that she had had severe child abuse as a young person.
That is correct.
She grew up in a home full of heroin addicts, right?
Opiate abuse, yes.
Yeah. And there was IPV between her parents.
Correct.
Right. And so you wanted to make sure that there wasn't some impact with this childhood trauma in the diagnosis of PTSD.
Yes.
Right. And so you decided to give her the test again.
Well, I didn't give it again, what's called testing the limits. I went back to some of the questions where she answered in the affirmative and said, and is this also happening vis-a-vis your childhood abuse? Are you also having intrusive thoughts and feelings about childhood? Are you avoiding thinking about things about childhood? Is that happening for you now as well?
All right, so there are a series of notations on the right-hand side. Let's go to page 5 of 20 in the test. All right, why don't we highlight the right-hand notations that start under the word childhood? All right. So the way you tested for childhood PTSD is to write a notation in the corner and answer a couple of questions. Same test.
Well, I wasn't administering a whole CAPS again. What I was doing was seeing, as we know with people who have what we call polyvictimization or revictimization, someone could in fact meet criteria for the PTSD from the domestic violence, but then they're also experiencing some symptoms as a result of the childhood abuse. Both can occur.
Right. But Mr. Depp isn't responsible for her childhood abuse.
That is correct.
Right. And the way you tested this childhood abuse PTSD is you made notations on the in the right-hand column of a form that you partially filled out for the IPV by Johnny, right?
Well, I disagree with the partially filled out. The frequency was clearly filled out in the box where we score the CAPS. But yes, I did write about the childhood to the right of that box.
Okay. And that is the appropriate way that the gold standard test for PTSD for childhood trauma should be administered.
If there were any affirmatives and I needed to go further, I could have administered another CAPS 5. There were not. I did not need to do that.
Okay. So you chose not to do a second CAPS 5, although you knew that she had suffered from severe childhood trauma.
No, because she wasn't suffering symptoms at that point in time, PTSD symptoms from the childhood trauma.
All right.
Mr. Dennison, are you moving to a different topic now?
I am.
Okay, all right, this might be a great time to take our morning break then. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll take our 15-minute break. Please do not discuss this case with anybody. Don't do any outside research, okay? Thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and take,
Your Honor, before we
Yes.
take the break.
Yes.
May I get a copy of the new exhibits from them so that I can see it over the break?
Well, I don't know if we can do it before, but we'll certainly get them to you.
Well, I mean, I need to be able to
Sure.
redirect, and I have never seen these.
okay, we'll go through it. That's
Right.
fine, all right?
Although it's in your exhibit.
So that's
Well,
fine.
if it's in my exhibit list, if they just tell me.
You tell you the exhibit numbers, that's fine. We'll work through it, okay? Let's take a recess till 11:40 then, okay?
Thank you,
All right,
Rob.
back at 11:40.